LaMelo Ball is one of the most polarizing players in the current NBA. On one hand, he is one of the players that you have to guard from 30 to 40 feet and stretches the defense as well as any other shooter in the league not named Steph Curry. With a knack for incredible plays that make Eric Collins scream like a cartoon anvil is being dropped onto his feet. And on the other hand, some of the risks that he takes result in some of the most boneheaded plays that you couldn't even imagine happening in a 14 and under AAU tournament. He remains an incredibly difficult shot taker and maker, but the other facet of his game is his ability to not only just thread the needle on incredibly tight windows, but hit his teammates perfectly in the hands no matter where they are on the floor. And these skills that LaMelo possesses were on full display even at Chino Hills High School, where he played with his brothers Lonzo and Leangelo, before LaMelo took his own unique path through the Lithuanian League, then to a league founded by his father LeVar, and eventually in the Australian League before being drafted in 2020 with the 3rd overall pick to the Charlotte Hornets. That brings up the question of why. Why did the Minnesota Timberwolves make this trade? And more importantly, why did the Charlotte Hornets after 6 seasons decide they want off of the LaMelo Ball thrill ride? Whoa. What's going on, y'all? My name is Walt James and welcome back to the Hooked on Hoops channel, where we talk about everything going on in the world of basketball. Last offseason, I made a video of some of my favorite signings in free agency, and in that video I was mocking Shams Charania for saying it was going to be one of the craziest off seasons ever, and it wasn't. But little did I know that he was actually just a time traveler from the future and got his seasons mixed up. But without wasting any more of our time, let's get into it. The biggest problem with LaMelo Ball has been his health over the past 6 seasons. The 2025-26 NBA season was just the second time in his career that he appeared in over 70 games, and the first time since the 2021-22 season that LaMelo was able to stay healthy throughout the majority of the regular season. With the 3 seasons prior, he finished playing 47, 22, and 36 games, with the biggest culprit being injuries to his ankles that have required multiple surgeries. But when LaMelo does play games, the Hornets are an elite offense behind him being a one-man offensive engine and uplifting the players around him. The Hornets finished top 10 in offensive rating both seasons that he was healthy, including finishing 5th last season only behind the Nuggets, Celtics, Knicks, and Spurs, the last 2 being the 2 teams that met in the NBA Finals, and 10th in the 2021-22 season, where the roster around him was not as complete as this year, with a large amount of minutes going to an older Gordon Hayward, a young Miles Bridges, and Terry Rozier, who is currently being indicted on federal charges of gambling and is possibly going to spend significant time in prison. It would be criminal not to include that LaMelo is infamous in Charlotte for being an extremely reckless and dangerous driver, with video evidence on multiple occasions of him speeding recklessly, running red lights, and in February of 2026, LaMelo hitting another car in his Grand Theft Auto 5 online-looking Hummer in uptown Charlotte that sent another driver to the hospital. And while thankfully no one was seriously injured, it adds to the reckless nature of LaMelo Ball, and when you're an NBA franchise investing hundreds of millions of dollars into somebody, every detail about character matters. The Charlotte front office believed that trading out LaMelo Ball for a more reliable spacing 4 and re-signing Kobe White to be their point guard so that they can move to build around younger players in Brandon Miller and runner-up Rookie of the Year Con Knipple to bridge the gap and still keep their identity of a high-volume 3-point shooting team that finished last season 2nd in 3-point attempts at 43.3 per game. But I think losing their playmaking offensive engine, who also provided spacing, that the Hornets are going to have a bit of an adjustment period, with the scouting reports focused to shifting to Miller and Knipple, both of whom did not have a large on-ball role last season in comparison to LaMelo Ball. The final trade was the Hornets sending LaMelo Ball and Josh Green to the Minnesota Timberwolves, and in exchange the Timberwolves sent back former 6th Man of the Year Naz Reid, who was a big fan favorite in Minnesota, along with an unprotected 2033 first-round pick from Minnesota, 3 first-round pick swaps, and 3 second-round picks. The swaps sound good, but only the 2028 swap between the Hornets and the Wolves is just a swap between those 2 teams. The others are a combination of teams involved like the Jazz, Spurs, and Mavericks, with the Hornets getting the least favorable or second least favorable pick out of the 3. We went over why the Hornets made this deal, with GM Jeff Peterson thinking that they're going to sell high on LaMelo with his injuries and get back some more draft capital to remain flexible going into the future, building around young stars Con Knipple and Brandon Miller. But we haven't gone over why the Minnesota Timberwolves decided to splash the remainder of their assets, pairing LaMelo Ball with Anthony Edwards. The Minnesota Timberwolves are coming off of their most successful 3-year period in their team's history. In 2024 and 25, they made the Western Conference Finals before losing to the Luka-led Mavericks in 2024 and the SGA-led Thunder in 5 games in 2025. And even as the 6th seed in 2026, the Wolves were able to beat the Denver Nuggets in the first round, despite injuries to star guard Anthony Edwards and Dante DiVincenzo tearing his Achilles in Game 4. The last 2 years before marked the team's first WCF appearance since Kevin Garnett led them there in 2004. The Wolves then went on a massive playoff drought before snapping their 13-year hiatus in 2018 with Jimmy Butler, Karl Anthony Towns, and Andrew Wiggins. As Anthony Edwards has ascended to superstar level, the Timberwolves have become a consistent playoff team in a tough Western Conference. And even with significant roster turnaround over the last few seasons, trading D'Angelo Russell for Mike Conley and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, trading Cat for Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, trading into the 2024 lottery for Rob Dillingham, trading Rob Dillingham and Leonard Miller for Ayo Dosunmu, trading Julius Randle after a poor 2026 playoffs after his presence has run its course, and making the highly scrutinized Rudy Gobert trade in 2022 that instantly raised the defensive floor. The Timberwolves are no stranger to home run picks and shaking up their roster when it's needed, and that's where we are with the Minnesota Timberwolves today. One of the biggest concerns that Minnesota has as an organization is keeping Anthony Edwards happy and in Minnesota. You'd be naive to think that the thought of Ant leaving the Timberwolves hasn't come up before. As happy as he seems to be, the team around him has started to crumble with injuries and making trades to save money and combat the second apron. The NBA is a league where stars ask out all the time, and if the Timberwolves aren't on a clear path of contention, it makes sense to want to flourish in another team and in another city. The clock really started ticking with Karl-Anthony Towns winning an NBA championship with the New York Knicks just 2 seasons after being traded away, and Anthony Edwards voicing his frustration at losing Karl-Anthony Towns. And that's partially why I love this trade so much for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Anthony Edwards is an incredible scorer, an amazing athlete, and a great leader for a young team, but the Timberwolves have always lacked a true playmaker at the point guard position. Having Anthony Edwards not only be the team's primary scorer, but also the team's playmaker for other guys around him was overtaxing and doesn't maximize his skill set to the best of his ability. And that's where LaMelo Ball comes in. Anthony Edwards has never had a point guard as talented as LaMelo next to him that can truly take the burden off of him. Adding into the equation that LaMelo is the same age as Ant, is an all-star quality point guard, and the value that they gave up for him wasn't too much even with all of his concerns, I think the Minnesota Timberwolves have hit a home run here. Obviously LaMelo isn't a perfect basketball player, but his strengths with playmaking and high-volume three-point shooting blend perfectly with Anthony Edwards, who can work very well off ball, make incredibly tough shots, and put insane pressure on the rim that makes this one of the most dynamic offensive duos we have ever seen together in the NBA. The Timberwolves point guards over the last few years were an extremely flawed D'Angelo Russell, old Mike Conley, Bones Highland, Rob Dillingham, who is a complete bust, and putting Dante DiVincenzo into this role. And while Dante is a good basketball player, this was completely misusing his skill set and putting him into a role that wasn't perfectly suited for him. Acquiring LaMelo also makes Rudy Gobert's life 1,000 times easier on the offensive end. LaMelo will be able to put the ball perfectly in front of the rim for Rudy to get him easy buckets. LaMelo Ball is one of the league's most creative and unique lob passers, and even if Rudy isn't as much of a spring chicken as he used to be, LaMelo will be a godsend for someone who doesn't have a great offensive game themselves. And Rudy continues to be the spine of the defense as he ages into his late 30s. He is still built like a statue and has incredible conditioning that allowed him to play 30 plus minutes in high leverage playoff situations. Minnesota of the last couple years had run its course. The Wolves decided to dump Julius Randle to Brooklyn for a swap with their 28th pick for Brooklyn's 33rd overall pick, and immediately pivoted into a new direction with a younger all-star caliber player that has his flaws, but the ceiling of the team is raised once again. And the team is hoping not only to be a playoff contender, but a contender to make their first NBA Finals in the team's history. I love this trade for Minnesota because a lot of teams with a young superstar love to stay stagnant and be too patient in a league that moves very quickly. Tim Connelly and the Minnesota Timberwolves saw the writing on the wall and pivoted to the best they could. If I had to pick a winner, I would pick the Minnesota Timberwolves, but I can completely understand why the Charlotte Hornets also felt like they needed to make this trade as well. And for me, that just leaves the question up to you as the viewer. I let my opinion be known, but do you feel that Minnesota was the winner in this LaMelo Ball trade? Do you think Charlotte made the right choice in selling high after one of their most successful seasons since Kemba Walker? Let me know in the comments down below, and if you want to keep up everything going on in the world of basketball, hit that subscribe button. This has been Walt James from Hooked on Hoops, and I'm glad you're here. Peace.
Well, that's all she wrote for Walt.